Hey Bag Maker, today I'm going to be talking about the OESD Perfect Pencil, various fabrics that I've added to my stash. The book review will be for a book called The Embroidered Closet, the November Challenge. Tonight's bag lab will be 2 different ways to make a ribbon strap, and there's a great giveaway at the end. I'm Sarah Lawson from Sew Sweetness. Thanks so much for joining me for Sewcial Sunday, my weekly sewing chat. Hey everyone, welcome to Sewcial Sunday. Thanks so much for joining me, whether you're watching live or the recording later on during your week. A couple quick reminders before we get started. My usual spam reminder, if you're watching over on Facebook and you ever receive a private message from a logo that looks just like our Sew Sweetness logo, please do report or block that. We don't send private messages through Facebook. And don't give any information out, such as your credit card number, don't wire transfer money, give your address or phone number, anything like that. And if you're watching over on YouTube and you've left a comment on the show and you see a reply to your comment, again, it usually looks like a copy of our Sew Sweetness logo. Do report or block that if it asks for any information that sounds a little bit fishy. Normally they're asking to wire transfer money in order to claim a prize, give credit card information, anything like that. Go ahead, report or block that. We never ask for payment in order to claim your prize, and also I always announce the winner's name verbally on the show, and also we've added the winner's name, the giveaway winner's name, to the description of the show, so you can find that by clicking the description of the show as well. I see Courtney's watching, Hassan is watching from Southern California, and Belinda from Chicago. Welcome everyone. My second reminder, everything that I'm scheduled to talk about, I link to in the description. So if you're interested in finding out more about any of the notions, fabrics, books, or projects that I talk about during Sewcial Sunday, just check that link in the description and you can find out more information there. So today's notion of the week was a suggestion slash question from Sarah M. Sarah emailed me a little while back asking about the OESD Perfect Pencil. She wanted to know how well it worked, and she was also concerned if the marks show up after ironing or if the marks come back after fabric gets cold. And so I decided to purchase the pencil. It actually comes in a 2-pack. Danny's going to switch to the overhead camera and I'll let you know how I think about it. So these are probably familiar to some. It is a wax pencil and it has sort of paper at the top. So as the wax kind of grinds down, you can peel away some of the paper, and then this little string over here, if you pull the string, it just pulls down to reveal more paper, which you can peel back as well, and then you just keep pulling the string down as you need to peel back the paper. So here's what the packaging looked like. Obviously I tore it open already. 2 wax pencils in the packaging, and they are iron-off pencils. Because they're wax, that makes sense. If you've ever used wax canvas in the past and you accidentally went to iron it with your iron, you'll probably have noticed that some of the wax comes off and it becomes like unwaxed, like similar to a regular piece of fabric. So I pulled out 2 pieces of fabric here. Oh, I should also note that the packaging for the Perfect Pencils also mentions that you should test it on a small area of your fabric first, like a scrap, before you start working on your project. So that's good to note. I feel like that's for any marking tool. You should always test it on a small scrap of fabric first. All right, so I've got my iron here. I've got a Kona cotton solid and also a scrap of Tula Pink fabric for my print example. And you can see my little lines over here. This is from marking earlier and using my iron. So it does leave, as you can see, it does leave a little bit of a trace. It's definitely more apparent in the solid. In the print, it's not as apparent unless you go looking for it, and I don't know that I necessarily would. So let me show you. I've got my ruler here just to show marking without the ruler and also with the ruler. I wanted to use the ruler because I felt like it was really important, because this isn't a pointed tip. I noticed when I use my ruler for marking, it doesn't get all the way up against the acrylic. So I'm going to just go back with my friction pen. I have the ruler in the same positioning. And I'm just going to go ahead and use the friction pen just so you can see the difference. Danny, can you zoom in just a little bit over here? There's about, from the outer edge of the wax pencil to my friction pen marking, there's like a hair less than 1/8 of an inch. So it's kind of a considerable distance. So in bag making, normally I'm using my ruler for marking squares and rectangles for my pieces. Obviously, if it's off by this much, might be a little bit of a problem. However, if you're marking other things, like maybe placement for magnetic snaps, maybe not so much of an issue. I'm going to go ahead and mark my print fabric too. Obviously, because it's a print, the marks are less visible after I've marked them. Obviously, that will vary depending on how dark the fabric is. So I'm going to go ahead and take my iron. I do have my wool ironing mat, but I have got my demonstration loaded up on it. So I'm just going to go ahead and briefly iron on my table. Okay, so as you can see, all my wax markings, you can still see that. So I guess, yeah, that probably would bother me just a little bit. Also bother me that if I need to use my ruler for something, it's not exactly flush with the ruler. As you can see on the print, it's kind of hard to see where I marked the wax on the print. So again, this will slightly vary and why the packaging recommends to test it on your fabric first. So if I had a test like this, I'd probably use a different marking tool. A test on a print where I can't really see the markings, maybe not as much of an issue. Your mileage may vary on that. And also putting this out in the cold, since it's wax and the iron melts the wax, I wouldn't expect it to reappear with the cold. But definitely the ironing doesn't come. I do see a faint hint from my friction marker, which I would expect on a solid color fabric, but definitely the wax is a lot more noticeable than the friction. So that's the OESD Perfect Pencil. Thanks Sarah M for sending that email suggestion. And if you ever have any suggestions for future notions that I can review on the show, feel free to let me know. Tamara says, does the wax build up on your iron when pressing it to get it to disappear? Oh, that's a great question, Tamara. I don't see any markings. I don't know if this will come up on camera. There we go. Yeah, my iron's pretty clean, so I don't detect, obviously I haven't used it a ton, but I don't detect any wax markings that I can tell on my iron. All right, so today, actually this whole weekend at my barn where I ride my horse, my trainer hosted a 2-day fitness clinic. So it was from 10 to 4 both days, yesterday and today. And obviously we were not working out for the full, 6 hours or what have you, but we brought in a fitness trainer that specializes in equestrian fitness. So he came down from New Jersey, and actually Danny and I picked him up from the airport on Friday, but he's fantastic. We talked about all sorts of different things, the mental aspect, nutrition, stretching, exercise. For some reason, in the horse world, we do a lot of warm up and exercise and stretching for our horses, but at least in my barn, we all just, myself included, we get our horse ready, get our horse warmed up, stretched out, and then we just get on. We don't do any stretching. I'll just speak for myself. I don't do any stretching myself. I just get on. And I feel like that's a problem because any other sport I've ever played, when I was a kid, when I played basketball, volleyball, we always warmed up, we did stretches, all sorts of things. And so I never really thought about it, but it is kind of odd for horseback riding that no stretching or exercising is really done. And so for us, this fitness clinic was really important, and I took a lot of notes. I definitely need to, I feel like I always considered riding my horse a workout because it is like a lot of core strength, a lot of leg strength, but our guest fitness trainer said that if it's something you do regularly or every day, then it's not exercise. So I was like, oh, okay, so something I normally do, which is riding my horse, that's not exercise. I need to do exercise on top of riding my horse. So That's what I was up to this weekend. Exercise is really important. I've slowly been getting back into exercise at our park district. Violet's friend's mother teaches kickboxing and Pilates yoga classes, so I've been doing that twice a week, and I definitely feel a lot better when I do exercise, and I also notice areas where I feel sore afterwards and also take note of areas where I don't feel sore. So I think exercise is really important and something I'm thinking about more and more as I get older. Maybe you've heard the saying before, if you don't use it, you lose it. So definitely want to keep up with the exercise, and I'll see what I can do as far as making it regular practice. For sure, the stretching will be a regular practice for me, but in light of that, I have a question for you. Let me know in the comments. What is your favorite type of exercise? Maybe you like going for walks every morning. Maybe you go to a yoga class a couple times a week. Let me know in the comments what type of exercise you like to do or what type of exercise you're doing on a regular basis. Either one is totally fine. All right, the new fabric that I've added to my stash, I've had it sitting here waiting to discuss on Social Sunday for a while. All these fabrics actually happen to be animal themed, so I'm going to have Danny switch to the overhead camera. All right, the first one up is, since we have a standard poodle, that guy right there, this one really caught my eye. I kind of like the whimsical drawings of the different dogs. I like it's sort of like a pale blue, periwinkle blue background. I'm going to be using this for one of the new patterns that I'm working on, this all small bags. Thought this would be good because this is sort of a smallish print. After I got this in the mail, I could not remember what exactly I purchased it for. Definitely bought it for a certain reason, but now that I have it here, I'm wondering why I bought. Looks like I bought
horses.
I know, because it has horses, but normally I'm trying to buy something for a specific use, and it looks like I bought 2 yards, so I'm wondering. Probably should have written it down before I ordered it because now I've forgotten already. And these last set of fabrics are designed by Wishwell, and they're all, actually probably Danny should zoom in because they're all tiny prints of household pets. So these are all birds, budgies, cockatiels, lovebirds. Again, these are tiny. There's my fingernail, as you can see, the print next to it, super tiny. Next up, you could probably just stay zoomed in because these are all super small prints. These are all different dogs, really cute. I kind of like the notion of the really tiny prints because these would be perfect for some pouches. All right, next up we have cats. And also you'll notice some of the cats and other animals are upside down. So this is what I would consider like a tossed print. And by a tossed print, meaning there's no or non-directional. There's no clear up and down for the fabric. It could go either way, which I kind of like. And then the last one, these are super, super tiny, but these are all guinea pigs, hamsters, and little hamster balls. So super adorable. I really love all these. But if you're interested in checking out any of those fabrics after the show, I've linked to all of them in the description. Another question for you. Thinking of those pet-themed fabrics, what pet or pets do you have? Let me know in the comments. You can either let me know what kind of animal it is or what kind of animal combined with their name. Let me know in the comments. I'm curious to see what all pets you have. I have our standard poodle Mikey is going to be 2 years old next month. My horse, off-track thoroughbred Olive, is 10, and my bearded dragon is Flash, and she's 5 years old. All right, because it is the beginning of November, our November challenge has started. For the month of November, you have 2 options for the challenge, and I've linked to the challenge in the description. The first option is to make the blue stem pouch from Minikin Season 4. It's a really quick pouch to put together, great for pens, pencils, markers, great for a quick gift or for yourself. And the second option for the November challenge is to make a Sew Sweetness item that you intend to gift. So either option, you can enter twice if you fulfill both of those. So say if you make a blue stem pouch and then maybe you make a amethyst project bag, you can enter both of those in the same month if you'd like to. Again, link is in the description, and there are two $50 gift certificates up for grabs for each of our monthly challenges, and you can find out more information by clicking the link in the description, and you can also enter your finished project for the month there. And starting with November, we're going to try to attempt to put together a slideshow of the entries for the month. So even if you've entered your photo in the Linky yourself, feel free to email us a photo if you'd like it to be included in the slideshow. And you can email that photo to sarah@sewsweetness.com. Danny's going to put my email address up on the screen. There it is. And additionally, you can use that email address if you ever have a question, need help with something. You can feel free to email me there as well. All right, so the book review for tonight is a book called The Embroidered Closet. Danny's going to switch to the overhead camera so that I can show you what's in the book. So the theme of the book is taking clothing or items you already own and adding embroidery to give them a little bit of extra spice. And so obviously, first part of every crafting book is techniques used in the project. So talking about different embroidery stabilizers, everything's included in the first couple chapters, and also specific to stabilizers, how they're used, how to know which one for what type of project you're making, and those are all demonstrated in step-by-step photos. Okay, so I thought this was important, this particular chapter, choosing fabrics for clothing embroidery. There's a different range, as you can see over here: shoes, hats, sweaters, aprons. There's an array of projects in the book, and they're all represented, the different types of fabrics in the book as well. How to wash, how to troubleshoot different things like puckering, hoop burn, which is kind of like the imprint that the embroidery hoop leaves after you take the hoop off your project. And then all of the different stitches are covered. So kind of a substantial, about 60 pages for the techniques in this particular book. And then these are all the projects. So all of the projects are represented by line outlines that you can either trace or print off on your copy printer if you have one at home. Those are all in the back of the book at full size. And then I'm just going to flip through and show you all the projects. So these are for embroidering these flowers on cotton tees. A sweater. I guess I never really thought about embroidering a sweater, but I think that looks pretty interesting and really unique. Embroidering a baseball cap. Again, notice the different variety of the embroidery stitches. This one is my favorite, very much so. If I saw this sweater in a shop, I would 100% buy it, but I really like the idea that you can just take a solid colored sweater and just really zhuzh it up by adding the really pretty embroidery to it. I also like the colors used in the threads are not bold, bright colors. They kind of complement the sweater color as well. The skirt's got a bunch of embroidery all over it. I also like the idea of this embroidered jacket. I was watching a show recently, and they had a jean jacket embroidered with bride, like someone was getting married, so they had bride on the back. It looked really great. This looks really great too. I like the calligraphy text on the back. The sneakers. I have a ton of Converse. I guess I never really thought about embroidering sneakers, but it looks really great. Patching jeans, a great way to keep jeans around that might have a hole in them or got a little bit dirty. So as you can see, there's a ton of different great projects, different substrates, certainly the blazer. This one's an apron. And then there's a really fun one coming up, the last couple of projects. The backpack, obviously this is a store-bought backpack, but if you're making a Sew Sweetness project and you'd like to add some embroidery, perhaps a little bit of inspiration for that. 4 different options for collars for the different seasons. And then I thought this one was really cool, a rose bralette. Really interesting. I just really love this. And again, all of the line drawn templates are in the back, and the book is called The Embroidered Closet, and the link is in the description in case you'd like to check that out after the show. All right, Danny, are you ready?
Interrupting the show for a special report because now it is time for Bag Lab.
All right, so for tonight's episode of Bag Lab, I wanted to talk about 2 different methods for making straps using ribbon. In this case, I'm using grosgrain ribbon. Danny's going to put a picture up on the screen. This was from a few years ago when I made the Ansel camera bags, and these were for Tula Pink's booth at Quilt Market. If you'll notice the strapping, Danny, could you put the pictures up real quick one more time? The strapping on the front of the bags, and then there's also strapping you can see from the sides. It's got a combination of fabric and then the grosgrain ribbon on it. All 3 had the same ribbon. But tonight I just wanted to talk about how we can get the ribbon on the strap using 2 different techniques. So the first method will be 4 layers of the strap fabric, and to reduce bulk, I've also got a different example to show you with just 2 layers of the fabric, and then in both examples the ribbon will just be top stitched on top of the strap fabric. All right, Danny, would you mind switching to the overhead camera? I'll get my iron going. So I'm going to start with the first example, which is probably something we're super familiar with, pressing straps, kind of like double fold bias tape. And for this example, it'll give us 4 layers of the fabric before the strap gets top stitch on top. So I'm going to open these both up. So for the double fold bias method, you'll need to know the finished width of your strap. Either 2 common widths are 1 inch wide finished and 1.5 inch wide finished. So you're going to multiply the finished width that you would like times 4. So in this example, for the 1 inch wide strap, multiplied times 4 is 4. For the 1.5 inch wide, multiplied times 4 is 6. So that's how wide I cut this. Obviously for this example, this is not a full length strap, but I felt like this short piece was enough to make the technique understood. All right, so I went ahead and applied Shapeflex interfacing to the wrong side of the fabric, and if you'll notice, the Shapeflex does not extend the entire length of my fabric. That was unintentionally to keep the interfacing out of the seam allowance to reduce the bulk a bit. So generally we're working with 2 different types of strap, either a strap where we press and we have a raw edge sewn into the bag seam, or we might have a strap pressed to the wrong side. In my example, I pressed to the wrong side by 1/2 inch, and then I pressed it like double fold bias tape, and in this example the raw edges are enclosed. So I've got both sides on this particular example, and what you'll do next, I did the same thing for this piece as well. It's just the wider strap piece. And so you'll want to take note of both the ribbon sizes that you'll be using and how much of the fabric that your ribbon will be covering, because when attaching the ribbon, no matter which size ribbon we choose, we're going to be top stitching it down 1/8 of an inch from either side of the ribbon. And so you want to take that into consideration when doing the initial top stitching, just so you're not top stitching the same area twice. So for example, if I'm using this wide ribbon on top of my 1.5 inch wide strap, as you can see when I put that on top, they're basically the same width. And so I'm going to come at the top stitching a little bit different so that I can have a single row of top stitching 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. All right, so for this example, I think I'm going to use, let's see, I'll use my less wide ribbon for this one. So for this example, I'm going to go ahead and pin, let me back up 1 second. So since my ribbon is less wide, my top stitching is going to fall more to the inside, and so I have a little bit of room on either side. So I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine before I even bring the ribbon out, and I'm going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch away from either of the side edges. One thing I'm going to do, actually let me pin this in place first before we get that initial top stitching done. Because this is a raw edge of the ribbon and I've pressed this so there's no raw edges showing here, I'm just going to fold this back in between the two layers so that when I finish the top stitching, that end of the ribbon is already tucked on the inside. And if you wish, you can draw two lines to kind of position the ribbon right down the middle. I'm just going to go ahead and eyeball it and place it on the inside. So I'm going to start off by doing that 1/8 of an inch top stitching on either side, and then I'm going to come back and sew to the inside of the ribbon 1/8 of an inch as well. So 2 lines of stitching. I always recommend matching your thread to your actual fabric, whether it be bobbin thread or top thread, and then also when sewing the ribbon on, I would suggest matching your top thread to your ribbon and your bobbin thread to your actual fabric so that the thread blends in a little bit better. For this example, I'm just using white thread so that you can see exactly where my stitches are. And I am using a slightly lengthened stitch length for the top stitching, so I'm going to be using 3mm stitch length. Okay, so actually, now that I've got this stitch down in place, I do recommend, if you do have this folded edge, to start stitching where the folded edge is, because as you can see, my ribbon bunched up over here at the end, and if I started sewing where the folded edge is, it would be more of a smoother finish, and then any excess ribbon could just come off this end where the raw edge is over here. All right, so you do the same thing whether your finished strap is 1 inch wide or 1.5 inch wide. And Renaissance ribbons makes a great assortment of different widths, and so it gives different options for having either more fabric or less fabric showing on either side, depending on what you prefer. Okay, so the second method that I wanted to talk about is having fabric where there's only 2 layers of fabric. So I've got this, I pressed this one before the show, but as you can see, I've got my little center line over here. When pressed toward the inside, there's raw edges showing over here. Since we're using the ribbon, the raw edges will be covered up by the ribbon. And one pro versus con of doing it this way is you have a thinner strap, but it's not necessarily less stable because the grosgrain ribbon, if you remember my video from a couple years ago about how to sew smooth straps, either the grosgrain ribbon or the twill tape provides extra stability where the strap won't kind of stretch at all. So even though there's only 2 layers of fabric, it is still quite a stable ribbon. So I've got my piece over here. This is for a 1 inch wide finished strap. For this method with the raw edges showing in the middle, you'll want to multiply your finished width of the strap that you need by 2. So for instance, if you need a 1 inch wide finished strap, you multiply that by 2 for 2 inches. If you need a 1.5 inch wide finished strap, you'll multiply that by 2, and that'll be a 3 inch wide piece of fabric that you'll cut. And again, I've left the shape flex out of the seam allowance, so I've cut it 1/2 inch shorter on either side. And I'm going to take my iron and I'm just going to go ahead and press this toward the wrong side by 1/2 inch. Okay, now I'm going to take my ruler out and a marking pen. I'm going to use my friction pen for this. And I'm going to measure halfway up. So because I cut this 2 inches wide, halfway up would be 1 inch. I'm just going to go ahead and draw a line right down the center. Okay, so I'm going to take my iron and I'm going to bring the lower edge up toward that line that I drew and press. And I'm going to try my best not to remove the line if I possibly can. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. And I always like to, I don't know if this has happened to you before, but if you press your strap and you ever see a little bit of the fabric showing underneath, I always like to take my finger and kind of pull it back a little bit just to make sure that it's not showing, and then it's also out of the way. So you can either use your Wonder Clips to hold the edges in place, or if you have any fabric glue, this is the Fons and Porter glue stick for use on fabric. You can use a washable glue stick also. You can also use the By Annie basting tape for this as well. I'm going to go ahead and apply some of the tape. I'm going to apply the tape right next to the line on either side. Actually, I'll do the basting tape on one side and I'll use the glue stick on the other side just so you can see both. So for the basting tape, I usually like to kind of make a little imprint with my fingernail, and that kind of helps release the paper so that I can reveal the second side of the adhesive. So I'm just going to go ahead and stick that down. And I'm going to take the glue stick. I think my glue stick is on its last little bit. Yeah, it's all dried out. I haven't used that in a while. All right, I guess we're not using the glue stick for the other side. I'm going to use the basting tape for the other half. Okay, and again for the top stitching, the initial top stitching, you'll want to take note of which ribbon you're using, how close it will be to the edge, and for this wide of a ribbon, I actually might just do one line of top stitching, or I think I'll maybe do 1/4 inch to either side first, and then possibly add the ribbon. It depends, I suppose, if you have the raw edge on one end or not. So I'm going to go ahead and tuck this in. If you'd rather not tuck the ribbon in to the fabric, you can always just go ahead and fold it over and have it laid directly on top. But as we saw from my previous little piece, it seemed to turn out a little bit better if I started from the folded edge and worked my way down. So I'm going to use Wonder Clips since my ribbon is about the same width as the fabric. And I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine, and I'll just go ahead and in a single pass, I'm just going to go ahead and stay 1/8 inch to the inside of the ribbon. I'm just going to go ahead and decrease my stitch length because I noticed that I'm not going to come up. I'm going to go ahead and decrease my stitch length slightly because I notice I'm not going to come up directly in the corner, and I'm going to decrease for just one stitch, hand crank it, and then turn back to my regular stitch length after I pivot. Okay, so this is what this one looked like after I stitched it in place. This is my raw end of the fabric over here, so I'm just going to go ahead and trim the ribbon even with the fabric. And so with the two different examples, this one was the first one that we did with the double fold bias tape. This is the second one with just the 2 layers of fabric. This one's quite thick, so if I had to fold this over hardware, I would say this is really thick. I'd probably maybe consider just using a rivet or Chicago screw just because of all of the thickness. This one's definitely a lot more manageable with just the 2 layers of the fabric, but still super strong again, like I mentioned earlier, because of the ribbon. And so either option's fine. Obviously this one's a little bit easier to work with, having just the 2 layers with the interfacing, but I think the ribbon just gives a really nice look to the strap, gives it something a little bit different, and especially with all of the options they have over at Renaissance Ribbons, very easy to add some unique ribbon to your strap, especially there's tons of Tula Pink ribbons that they're carrying. So I've linked to Renaissance Ribbons in the description in case you're interested in checking out all the ribbons that they have available. And let me know if you decide to use this method for making a strap for your next bag. All right, next up is announcing the winner of last week's giveaway, and that winner is Sandy Gallivan. So congratulations to you, Sandy. Please email me after the show so that I can get you connected with your prize. And there's also another giveaway at the end of the show. Elizabeth says, great tutorial, thanks. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Valerie says, don't forget to hit that button. Thank you very much. Winless Original says, helpful bag lab as per usual. Thank you. Tamara says, the beautiful ribbons really bring the straps up a level. Yeah, thanks, Tamara. I think they definitely do. Kathy says, I love the hint about decreasing stitch length at the corners. I learned that from you. One other thing I wanted to mention about the corners. Before you pivot, I did it on my machine. I don't know if you caught it, but before you pivot, it's never a bad idea to raise your needle part of the way. You don't want to raise it so much so that you can see the hole in the needle where the thread goes in, but raising it just a little bit prevents it before you pivot. This has to be before you pivot. So when you stop before you turn the corner, before you pivot, raise the needle up a little bit, then pivot, and then continue sewing. The reason for that is if you, let me see if I feel like I didn't do that with one corner, and it's, yeah, I'm gonna have Danny switch to the overhead camera. So with this, I think you're gonna have to zoom in, Danny. So with this, hopefully, I don't know if this will be super clear because of the ribbon. With this second one I did the pivot, and as you can see, the thread where I marked is where the thread is. There's a nice clean corner. With the first one, I did not pivot. As you can see, the thread kind of made a little diagonal, and it missed you can see the hole right there. It missed the hole because before I pivoted, I didn't raise the needle partly. And so that can sometimes happen. It doesn't always happen, but it happens once in a while. So if you're finding that happens when you're top stitching a corner where you have to pivot, make sure you lift the needle slightly before you complete the pivot, and then you'll prevent that from happening. The reason for that is when you slightly raise the needle, it fully grabs the bobbin thread, and if you pivot before slightly raising the needle, sometimes it misses the bobbin thread for just one stitch, which is why you get that weird little diagonal corner over there. Hopefully that makes sense. I do have a video that we did maybe last year showing that in more detail, but in a nutshell, that's how and why that happens. Carrie says, what about to sew a ribbon to a webbing? Is it proper and will it look good? That's a good question. I don't have, oh, I do have webbing over here from last Sunday. This is let me move this pressing mat out of the way. Danny, would you mind switching to the overhead camera? And I got some more ribbons over here. So this is the new Tula Pink solid colored webbing that came out last week. This is 1 inch wide. I have some other Renaissance ribbon that I had on my table. So yeah, this looks fabulous. Actually, since we're here and We've got my sewing machine camera on. I'm just going to go ahead and clip a little piece off. We'll take this to the sewing machine, and I'm just going to top stitch it down. I'm just going to stitch it once, 1/8 of an inch to the inside of the little banana ribbon over here. Thanks, Carrie. I don't know why I did not think of that with all this webbing sitting over here. Thanks, Danny. So here's, obviously you'll probably pin this and make it a little bit more centered than I did, but I don't think I did it too bad of a job. That's what it looks like from the back. Again, you'll want to coordinate your thread so that your bobbin thread matches the webbing so that it doesn't stand out. Unless you'd like the stitching to stand out, in that case, you can use something that contrasts your webbing. Yeah, that's super cute. I love that. And that's a really substantial strap. And again, that's the Tula Pink webbing. We have it in the 5 different solid colors, as well as the stripes if you like the stripes too. Stripes would be fine for this as well. Oh yeah, that's super cute. Thanks, Carrie. Oh, Lori wants to know, what kind of ribbon are you using? So I used, these were all ribbons for my stash from Renaissance Ribbons. They're grow grain ribbons. So they have the, if you're familiar with that type of ribbon, it has the, you can see like the weave on the back side usually, normally, which is why you want to top stitch it on top of something. Soap and Girl says, I have seen dog collars made that way too. Oh yeah, dog collars would be great for the ribbon too. Actually, our dog Mikey has a few collars with ribbon top stitched on top of webbing. Yeah, they look really neat. All right, Danny. All right, I apologize. We're just doing a few questions tonight. Sometimes the demonstrations take a little bit more time, and I do enjoy doing the longer demonstrations on the show. Hope that's okay. But I will be back again next Sunday with Danny, and I'll be answering lots more questions live. One last thing to get to is the giveaway for tonight. Giveaway prize is a $50 gift certificate to my website. You can purchase patterns, videos, maybe you want to check out the Tula Pink webbing. It'll be one randomly drawn winner. You have until the end of the day this Saturday to leave a comment on the show. I'll announce the winner on next Sunday's show, and I have a bonus question for you that you can answer in the comments for an extra method of entry. My question is, what is your favorite way to start the day? Maybe you make yourself some coffee, breakfast, maybe you put off breakfast till later in the day, maybe you pull out your cell phone, maybe you watch something on TV. Let me know in the comments what your favorite way to start the day is. Thank you so much for joining me for Sewcial Sunday. I'll be back again next Sunday. I hope you have a great week and happy sewing. Bye, everybody.